Amazing transformation. Blind Millionaire's shocking truth revealed after 5 years in the dark. Thomas McCallister stood at the edge of his living room, a once bustling hub of creativity, now cloaked in silence and shadows. The faint smell of cedar lingered, reminiscent of the countless models he had built with his hands, the soothing touch of wood grain guiding his architect's intuition. But that intuition felt like a distant memory now, swallowed by an all-consuming darkness. The whispers of the suburban neighborhood enveloped him like a suffocating blanket. The blind architect, they called him, a veiled judgment hanging heavily in the air. He was a ghost, wandering his own life, wrestling with the stigma that followed him as surely as his own shadow once did. He could hear the laughter of children outside, the rhythmic sway of echoes that brought discomfort. They had no idea about his world, the one where blind spots could only be felt, not seen. It gnawed at him. Every laugh felt like a reminder of the man he should have been. Society expected him to accept his fate, an accident, a tragedy, and now, a perceived decline of ability. Was he still worthy? In the darkest hours, they taunted him with memories of accolades, steeped in bitterness that he no longer deserved. Yet, in this cavernous void, Thomas rediscovered a hidden talent, a design philosophy crafted not through sight, but sound and touch, transforming building spaces into auditory landscapes. It was a bittersweet revelation, where despair sparked a new dawn. But how could he step back onto the stage with the specters of his past looming above him? He envisioned spaces that breathed life into the possibilities of accessibility, yet each stroke of inspiration was often tainted by self-doubt and the nagging refusal of his brother Mark, once an ally, now a rival in the shadows of the McCallister legacy. Mark's scent of ambition was suffocating, pushing against Thomas's desire to create in a world that had turned unwelcoming. The tension coiled between them, now reversed. Mark, the eager heir, determined to strip his brother of the family firm, as if Thomas's blindness rendered him a relic of the past. He could almost hear Mark's voice drone about family reputation, lacked consideration, yet possessed an unyielding chokehold on their father's company. It left Thomas cold, the shadow of brotherly love tangled in competition. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. The unraveling came as he fought a powerful corporation attempting to claim his ideas. Betrayal, a blow to the gut. Fear wrapped around his heart. He could hear the clock ticking, a reminder that time was running out to reclaim his vision. Stray thoughts cut deep. If he stepped forward to defend himself, would he break the familial bond he desperately clung to? If he retreated, would he vanish completely into the whispers of the blind architect? Caught between the pursuit of justice and family loyalty, Thomas felt the walls narrowing. His breaths quickened as the uncertainty amplified. He had unearthed a trove of family documents that hinted at a deeper legacy, yet alongside them was a frightening question. Could he lay claim to the name, the honor, and shoulder the weight of a family commitment, or would he succumb to the invisible hand of stigma? As he navigated through this fiery crucible, he stood at a precipice. The path ahead promised conflict, loyalty, and veiled truths. The choice lingered like a specter at his side: reclaim a life once built, or forge a new destiny in a world where he was deemed unworthy. What would it cost him to step back into the light? The answer loomed heavily above, an inevitable clash that pulsed with growing urgency. With every ounce of resolve, Thomas pushed forward, the stakes now greater than blood or ambition. The clock ticked louder, reverberating in his ears as the enormity of choice engulfed him. He had to decide, once and for all, how much of himself he was willing to fight for. Thomas took a deep breath, steadying himself against the tidal wave of uncertainty crashing over him. The faint vibrations of the world beyond his walls remained a stark reminder of both possibility and abandonment. Each tick from the clock echoing on the mantel felt like a countdown, intensifying his internal struggle. He grasped the parchment strewn across the polished oak table, Within it lay his father's journal, filled with sketches, thoughts, and unfinished ideas, dreams woven from the very fabric of their family legacy. The weight of that history bore down on him, challenging him to rise and claim what was rightfully his, or risk letting it slip into the hands of Mark. Would exposing Mark's betrayal serve as the spark illuminating his own path forward, or would it set ablaze the fragile remains of their brotherly connection? In the distance, the laughter of children transformed into discordant murmurs. Each tone resonated as mockery against his insecurities. Impulse flickered at the edges of his resolve to remain dormant. He needed to act. This was his moment, but how to channel his newfound architectural philosophy into a viable strategy? An idea sparked, sharp as lightning in a stormy twilight. He could create a project that showcased his unique vision, spaces that resonated with emotion and accessibility. Yet even as he entertained this thought, the familiar sensation of doubt whispered insidiously in his ear. Could a blind man truly design spaces that spoke to the eyes of others? His mind turned, grappling relentlessly with the implications of failure. He could almost feel Mark's condescending smirk, draining the air from the room. The path neither seemed clear nor free of obstacles. Still, inspiration swept through him, compelling him to pivot from fear's shackle into the light of creativity. As the evening deepened, Thomas began to envision the project, an innovative community center that broke barriers for all. It was a place where architecture would harmonize with sound, texture, and the innate experiences of those who entered. His thoughts scoured the depths of his memories, past designs, client feedback, even the voices of admiration that once filled his studio. In that moment, he cultivated a quiet determination that flooded his senses. Aligning each mental thread, he contemplated the logistical challenges. How would he assemble a team that believed in his vision? Who would rally behind a blind architect to propel this dream forward? The distance stretched ahead, yet in that expansive unknown, Thomas felt a flicker of hope ignite within him, a renewed understanding of his place amidst the shadows of his past. Engaging with this community project required external support. He hesitated, weighing self-advocacy against vulnerability. Should he invite Mark into the fold, or would collaboration mean sacrificing his authority on the project? The internal battle for control ignited the tension. However, choosing not to collaborate with his brother could risk targeting Mark's ambition, potentially escalating their rivalry into something more destructive. As dawn broke with soft, tentative light drawing nearer, Thomas steadied himself on the precipice of this decision. He could no longer allow himself to be the passive figure history dictated. The weight of his family name pressed against his back, urging him to rise. Yet simultaneously, it warned against the potential fracture that could ensue. In that moment of self-reflection, he locked his focus on the sound of activity from the neighborhood, a vibrant reminder of life pulsating forward. Thomas resolved to battle through the chaos, prepared to confront Mark, ready to unveil his vision to the world. The clock was ticking louder than ever, and he had no intention of allowing it to derail his plans. The time had come to face not just his brother, but the very identity he had began to doubt. Would Thomas reclaim his narrative, or find himself trapped in the shadows of someone else's story? With a surge of resolve, he stood tall against the uncertainty, preparing to take the first step forward into open confrontation. The moment had arrived to redefine what it meant to be both architect and brother. The real test of his vision was yet to come. Thomas leaned against his workbench, the texture of the wood grounding him as he prepared for a confrontation he long avoided. He could hear the faint hum of cars passing outside, a constant reminder of the world that moved forward, while he felt stuck in a vortex of uncertainty. As he placed his father's journal back onto the table, he weighed it in his hands, recognizing both the burden and the inspiration contained within its fragile pages. The sketches of visionary buildings danced in his mind, a personal legacy now poised to become his guiding compass. With each tick of the clock, his thoughts spiraled, centering on one critical question. How could he present his vision to Mark without relinquishing control? The vision of an accessible space that resonated deeply with all who experienced it was captivating, yet he felt like an incomplete artist facing a blank canvas. He could feel the specter of doubt looming closer, dragging him down into the depths of what-ifs and self-criticism. Suddenly, clarity struck amidst the turmoil. There was a way to gather support without sacrificing his authority. He could reach out to the blind community and invite their input, creating a collective of unique perspectives that would fortify his vision. This could provide validation, not just for himself, but for his ideas, bridging the gap between his doubts and ambitions. He could present this collaborative effort to Mark, emphasizing that this was not about personal rivalry, but about unity and creativity. Pulses of energy surged through him, igniting a newfound determination. Why not look beyond Mark, beyond his family legacy, and into the broader spectrum of architects and creators who believed in inclusivity? His fingers raced across the keyboard as he began drafting emails to potential collaborators. He envisioned a design document that illustrated his philosophy, incorporating sound trails and tactile pathways, avant-garde elements that transformed convention into experience. His hesitance abandoned him. Now, he was action incarnate. As daylight crept through the window, infusing the space with possibilities, fear still lingered. He recalled specific moments from sketches his father had made, the gentle nuances of light and shadow, and how he had always admired their beauty without needing to see them. Understanding how to engage with the world through different senses had always been Thomas's hidden strength. This was his greatest asset, a unique lens through which to innovate. In the throes of his enthusiasm, he realized that confronting Mark needed to become a priority, not just for his project, but for their fractured relationship. He envisioned standing across from him in their childhood home, where they had played and argued. It was time to embrace conflict rather than avoid it. The conversations would be difficult, emotional. Vulnerability would be his best tool. It was the only way to foster true appreciation for the vision he was creating. Strengthened by this clarity, Thomas prepared for the confrontation that awaited him with Mark. He strategized a few potential talking points, considering how he could frame his ideas as an embodiment of their father's vision, rather than a competition. As he exited his workshop, he could feel the aftermath of his resolve swirling within him like a storm about to unleash its power. Yet, an undercurrent of anxiety pooled in his stomach. Would he walk away victorious, or would the confrontation fracture him further? The walls seemed to close in as the weight of the forthcoming conversation engaged every well-worn nerve. Anxiety gripped him, but one thought emerged through the chaos. He would no longer be defined by Mark's choices. He was ready to be seen, his vision, his identity reclaimed. Today would mark his first step into the light of his own story. But would that story resonate, or would shadows continue to loom large? The end of his uncertainty was a heartbeat away. Thomas stood in the familiar yet daunting expanse of the childhood home, the walls whispering echoes of laughter and conflict intertwined. The scent of aged wood mingled with his trepidation, creating an atmosphere heavy with unresolved memories. Approaching the living room, he could already see Mark seated at the old brown sofa that had borne witness to their countless debates and momentary reconciliations. Though he could not see his brother's expression, he felt the pressure of his gaze, an unspoken challenge that ignited a deep-rooted anxiety within him. Steeling himself, Thomas took a deep breath and stepped forward, feeling as if he were crossing a threshold into a battleground. When Mark finally spoke, his voice sliced through the air, laden with skepticism. "So, it's about that project again, isn't it?" No longer would Thomas allow doubt to claw at him. He opened his mouth, ready to articulate the vision that had been fermenting in his mind, an idea that transcended the competition. "It's more than just a project, Mark. It's a philosophy." The urgency in his voice matched the thumping of his heart. Mark leaned back, crossing his arms. "A philosophy? It's still just your idea. If you want any support, you have to remember it's our father's legacy at stake." The weight of inheritance pressed heavily between them, as if both brothers were trying to claim it without truly understanding what it entailed. Thomas could feel the mantle of their father settling around his shoulders, suffocating him with expectations. But he knew he had to break free from those constraints. "I appreciate that, but it's essential that the design transcends personal ties. It must meet the needs of those who face barriers every day. My vision caters to inclusivity," he articulated with newfound conviction. Mark raised an eyebrow, intrigued, but still skeptical. And how do you plan to achieve that? In that moment, Thomas recalled those emails he had drafted, how seeking the input of the blind community would serve as the foundation for real impact. Rather than present it as a solitary endeavor, he leaned into the approach of collaboration. I've reached out to several organizations. The feedback from the community will help guide the design choices. It's not just about my interpretation. It's about creating something that resonates. For a heartbeat, silence stretched between them, thick with the weight of potential understanding. Then Mark spoke, voice softening slightly. Do you think they will accept your vision? Will they want your input? The question struck a chord, stirring fear within Thomas. What if his ideas did not resonate? What if they viewed him as just another architect imposing his will? Yet, despite that stirring doubt, he felt a flicker of courage ignite within him. I believe they will, he asserted, careful to maintain his tone, steady, yet impassioned. I'm focusing on creating spaces for experiences, all senses engaged, allowing everyone to feel welcome and encouraged. Mark's posture shifted, intrigue overtaking a fraction of his skepticism. What would those spaces be like? What would it feel like to be in one? Thomas seized the opportunity, diving into a description of spaces filled with textured surfaces, ambient sounds tailored to guide and comfort, and scents that draw people into a world that embraces them rather than isolates. The conviction behind his words surged forth, painting an increasingly vivid tapestry of the future he envisioned. Mark listened, his arms unfolding as he contemplated the picture Thomas had painted. But suddenly, a realization suffused the moment with tension. Thomas had opened the door for dialogue. Yet what if the revelations of their past lurked nearby, ready to ambush their budding understanding? Time hung in the balance as they navigated the memories that shaped them both. Would they forge a path toward collaboration, or would the shadows of their past continue to eclipse their efforts? The moment stretched out, charged with the promise of possibility, yet hauntingly precarious. With Mark's skepticism crackling like electricity in the air, Thomas felt the weight of uncertainty ensnare him once more. As he prepared to delve deeper into his vision, he realized the conversation was just beginning, and each revelation carried the potential to either heal or deepen the rift that lay between them. What truths remained concealed in their shared history, and was he ready to face them? The air tightened around Thomas as he searched for the courage to confront not only Mark's skepticism, but also the much deeper and raw currents of their shared past. He had edged closer to a breakthrough, yet the thought of retreating back into the shadows of their childhood loomed like a specter. Think about it, Mark, he pressed, hoping to turn the conversation back to strategies for their professional future. Core principles like accessibility, interaction, and comfort should frame every decision. You might see my vision as merely an idea, but it could redefine our legacy. Mark shifted uncomfortably on the couch. That's a big claim, Thomas. You know our dad was a traditionalist when it comes to architecture. He built for the times, not the dreams. Those dreams are what people need. Our father's work, while admirable, wasn't always inclusive. It doesn't speak to everyone. It's time to challenge that, Thomas insisted. The words tasted like rebellion in his mouth, and beneath that rebellion simmered a fear that threatened to dismantle his newfound resolve. But the more he articulated his vision, the more he discerned something remarkable, the tentative intrigue in Mark's eyes. This could be his moment. What would it mean for our family name if we succeeded in creating something really meaningful? His question hung in the air, inviting more than just skepticism. It compelled thought. What if we fail? Mark countered, the defensive tone returning. The stakes are higher than just personal pride. If we misstep, it reflects badly on both of us, and on Dad's name. The fear in Mark's voice resonated with Thomas, echoing the doubts that plagued him. Yet, this was not just a professional venture. It was a chance to redefine how they viewed success through a lens of empathy and connection. If success is defined only by legacy, then we're constrained by the past, Thomas retorted. What if we measure it by impact instead? By how many lives we touch, how many barriers we break? Suddenly an idea sparked in his mind. Let's do an experiment. We host a roundtable with members of the community, and we filter their feedback into our design. If it's a flop, then at least we mustered the courage to take a stance. His heart raced as he laid out this proposition. Mark's brow furrowed, clearly considering the weight of the matter. You're asking for a lot of trust, Thomas. What if they reject our ideas? What if they don't want our input? But what if they do? The question hung provocatively in their shared space, and for a moment, Thomas believed he could see a flicker of hope in his brother's demeanor. They might welcome our involvement. Dialogue could spark something neither of us has dared to consider. Silence enveloped them again, thick and contemplative. As moments stretched, Thomas fought against the anxiety clawing for dominance within him. The past had cast shadows long enough. It was time for something new to emerge from those ashes. Finally, Mark nodded, albeit hesitantly. Okay. Let's consider it then. Suddenly, the weight of unresolved memories loomed larger than ever. They were embarking on an unstable path toward collaboration, yet the specter of their childhood looming over them remained unresolved. With Mark's reluctant agreement, a new door opened. One fraught with potential but also tethered tightly to the ghosts of their shared history. The conversation today felt pivotal, but Thomas was left grappling with the lingering uncertainty. Would they truly break free from their past, or would old patterns haunt their journey? As the brothers sat in the waning light of the living room, Thomas felt the boundaries of their relationship teetering on the brink of transformation. Could their burgeoning partnership defy the constraints of familial expectations, or would it crumble under the weight of their unresolved issues? The moment had arrived to navigate that treacherous path, rekindled with a sense of urgency. Thomas knew within himself, this was not just about redefining architecture. This was about redefining who they were as brothers. And with that realization came a piercing question. Was he ready to confront the full weight of their past and everything it entailed? The following morning, the muted sunlight filtered through the gauzy curtains of Thomas's studio, illuminating prints scattered randomly across the surfaces of his desk. Each one represented a piece of a dream he scarcely dared to claim. He leaned back in his chair, grappling with an uneasy sense of determination that thrummed beneath the surface. The turmoil of yesterday's conversation lingered, reminding him that action was the only antidote for uncertainty. His thoughts flickered back to Mark's hesitant nod, a flicker of promise amid the shadows of their pasts. This moment echoed in his mind, pushing him not to wallow in self-doubt, but to harness the courage he had discovered. Yet the duality of hope and fear curled tightly around his resolve, a constant reminder of what was at stake. With a flick of his wrist, he pushed away the sketches of conventional structures and turned his attention to a blank sheet of paper. This would not simply be another architecture proposal, it would be a manifesto for change. He envisioned a community that did not just tolerate difference but embraced it, structures that offered accessibility not merely as an afterthought, but as a fundamental tenet. This vision surged through him like an adrenaline rush, igniting his instinct to create. Dialogue sparks change, he murmured to himself, the mantra taking root in his psyche. It was time to draft not only designs but also a framework for the roundtable discussion. As he wrote, he could feel the swell of possibility surrounding him. Yet as the words flowed from his pen, another voice, a faint whisper of doubt, slithered into the corners of his consciousness. What if Mark changed his mind? What if their childhood resentments paralyzed their ambition? The nagging questions clawed at the edges of his enthusiasm, urging him to reconsider the fragile partnership they were forging. Determined to confront this turbulence, Thomas decided to reach out to some friends from architecture school. Their diverse backgrounds and critical perspectives could offer the momentum needed to transition his ideas to reality. After a few phone calls and texts, arrangements were made for an informal brainstorming session. The day approached with a kind of frenzied anticipation. Thomas meticulously prepared his ideas, wanting to leave no room for misunderstandings. Each proposal was forged in the crucible of his passion, reflecting the empathy he longed to instill in his work. When the day arrived, Thomas welcomed his friends into the open, airy space of his studio. Sensing the electricity in the air, he felt himself torn between elation and sheer terror. His heart hammered as he began to present his vision. What if architecture could challenge norms? What if it could become a canvas for connection? He urged, his voice gaining strength with every word. The responses were immediate and varied. Some were excited, drawn in by his passion. Others challenged him, grilling his concepts with pointed questions. Thomas reveled in the discourse, feeling one step closer to what it meant to truly engage others. For perhaps the first time, he felt the throaty warmth of collaborative growth rather than the suffocating weight of judgment. As the session concluded, a sense of achievement washed over him. He could see his ideas evolving in real time, but the realist in him warned that this was merely the first step of many. Every moment of validation was intertwined with the looming specter of Mark's reticence, a reminder that his journey would require more than just innovative blueprints. It would demand a deeper understanding and confrontation of the very wounds layered between them. Exhilarated but aware of the hurdles still standing before him, Thomas realized he was standing at the edge of the precipice. He needed to approach Mark again and present not just the ideas birthed from this collaboration, but also the necessity of Mark's input and partnership. Would his brother welcome the vulnerability and participate fully in this journey forward? The chasm of their past still threatened to swallow them whole, but for the first time in years, Thomas felt the raw energy for confrontation coursing through him, ready to bridge the divide. But how would Mark respond when faced with the reality of their shared path? The next conversation loomed ahead like a tightly coiled spring, ready to unleash whatever lay hidden beneath their fractured bond. Thomas's heart raced as he prepared for the next step. The previous brainstorming session had invigorated him, pushing him to redefine not only his professional aspirations, but also the personal connections that had been frayed. With every passing moment, the anticipation of speaking to Mark pressed heavier on his chest. No longer was it merely about the architecture. It was a necessity for healing. That evening, he studied the city skyline from his studio window, the sunset casting hues of orange and crimson across the buildings. It felt fitting. He longed for a transformation, not just of structures, but of relationships. He could sense an oscillation between hope and trepidation within him. What if he failed to convey the depth of his vision? What if Mark didn't resonate with the ideas that had taken root in his heart? His phone buzzed, snaps of messages lighting up the screen, drawing him back into the present. None were from Mark. Instead, they offered affirmations from friends who were enthusiastic about his concepts. Yet, even the support failed to quell the gnawing doubt. As he reflected, he realized he had elevated this moment into a make-or-break scenario, the pressure likely skewing what was merely a conversation into a trial of worthiness. Determined to approach Mark with both clarity and vulnerability, Thomas spent the night drafting a plan. He compiled his sketches, pulling apart their potential impact on community and identity. However, with every line drawn, his mind spiraled into memories of their childhood. The times when the careful balance between brotherly love and rivalry had frayed into something almost unrecognizable. His thoughts snagged on years of shared pasts, the laughter and the arguments that had propelled them towards the individuals they had become. Eventually, exhaustion tugged him into slumber, his dreams a tangle of hope, fear, and fragmented memories of Mark. Morning light filtered into the studio, illuminating the plans strewn about as if demanding urgency. In that moment, a flicker of resolve struck him. Addressing Mark would not simply be about presenting ideas, it needed to be a catalyst for reconciliation. Hours later, armed with proposals and a heightened sense of purpose, Thomas inhaled deeply and dialed Mark's number. His skin prickled with anticipation as the phone rang. Seconds felt like hours, but finally Mark answered, his voice a mix of familiarity and uncertainty. "Thomas? Hey, it's me. Can we talk?" The weight of those words struck deeper than anticipated. There was a pause on the other end, and Thomas felt the familiar gnawing dread, a premonition of impending rejection. "Sure. About what?" Mark's tone was carefully neutral. "I think it's about time we discussed our project. I've spent a lot of time thinking about how we can approach it. I really need your input," he replied, pushing the edges of his vulnerability into the conversation. "I get that, but it's—" Mark hesitated. "It's complex. I don't want to drag you down." "No, it isn't like that," Thomas pressed, his voice gaining an urgency driven by necessity. "This has to be a dialogue, not just a project. I want us to grow together, not just as partners but as brothers. We need to unpack the past, and I can't do it without you. A silence hung over the conversation, heavy and thick like fog. Thomas clenched his jaw, anxiety twisting in his gut. Would this invite a breakthrough, or would old wounds roar their way back into the light, rearing their heads between them like a volcano ready to erupt? Finally, Mark broke the silence, his voice low but steady. I don't know if I can handle that conversation, Thomas. Those words landed hard, a cold splash of reality that threatened to drown his resolve. But deep down, anger was not the emotion that surged. It was a challenge. If they were to build something genuine, it demanded authenticity, an excavation of shared experiences, raw and unfiltered. Thomas inhaled, ready to push back. Then let's unpack it together. I'll meet you halfway. But was he truly prepared for what that would demand? The next layers of their bond, with all the complexities entangled therein, awaited to unfold. Mark's roots of doubt would either entangle or unearth their potential, but only by navigating this path could Thomas seize control of his own destiny. Would he courageously confront the rising tide of their history, or would he retreat back into uncertain shadows? As the weight of the future pressed upon him, Thomas realized he was standing on a precipice, not just of ideas, but of brotherhood. Would Mark join him in this journey, or would this attempt fall short, leaving both men to confront their fears alone? Thomas's pulse thrummed in his ears, drowning out everything but the weight of Mark's words. The tentative thread stretched between them, taut and trembling with potential. He sat at his cluttered desk, sketches spread around like a chaotic map of thoughts, each pulsating with memories. Through the haze of doubt, he recognized the core of his being, the desire to forge something more than a fleeting partnership. He craved a deeper connection, one that would transcend their familial struggles. He pictured Mark's face, the boyish grin that had faded over the years into something guarded. If they were to navigate the complexities of their shared history, they needed a foundation of honesty. Thomas's fingers traced over the inked lines of his proposals, the physical manifestation of his vision. With each stroke, he realized the synergy between architecture and relationships. Both required intricate planning, patience, and sometimes a disruptive force to break down walls. Suddenly, clarity washed over him. This project was more than a professional venture. It was a symbolic architecture that mirrored their complicated relationship. Each building could stand for a moment of their past, the triumphs and the turbulence, while also creating space for healing. Realizing this ignited a flame of determination. If he could approach Mark with this angle, perhaps he could pull him out of the quicksand of uncertainty. With newfound resolve, Thomas readied himself. He scribbled down thoughts on how architecture could embody their reconciliation, notes bursting with analogies of structural support, and the need for robust foundations. If he could communicate this, he might touch the fragments of Mark's hesitations, persuading him to engage. To physically manifest their growth, he needed Mark's partnership. He called Mark again, willing to risk vulnerability once more. The line crackled with static, a metaphorical representation of the distance between them. As soon as Mark answered, Thomas launched into his ideas with fervor, detailing how architecture could encapsulate their experiences, each blueprint reflecting an aspect of their shared childhood. It's not just about the project, it's about us, he pressed. Imagine these buildings telling our story. Silence greeted his words, a cavity that threatened to expand into doubt. Was he overreaching again? Would Mark interpret this as an emotional ploy rather than a vision for collaboration? Then slowly, Mark responded, Okay, I see where you're going, but it's not easy for me to revisit those memories. Thomas felt his breath quicken, the tension between hope and fear unfurling. He had stumbled upon something crucial. Mark's reluctance stemmed from a well of unresolved feelings. I understand, but that's why we must do this together. It doesn't have to be overwhelming. As Mark shifted into contemplation, Thomas's unease transformed into something powerful, a commitment to both honesty and risk. They were at a crucial juncture. This conversation could either deepen their connection or reveal cracks that had yet to be explored. "Let's sit down face to face," Mark said finally, a tinged note of acceptance framing his words. The invitation settled over Thomas like sunlight breaking through a canopy. "Tomorrow, my place?" As he ended the call, Thomas felt the echo of a thundering heartbeat in his ears, the charge of possibility wrapping around him. He knew the next meeting would demand his utmost sincerity and courage, a moment where masks would need to be shed. But as he cleanly stacked away his sketches, doubt still loomed. Would Mark truly be ready to open old wounds? The potential for confrontation simmered just beneath the surface. Would they both find the strength to tackle the past, or would it push them further apart? A knot of anxiety curled in his stomach. This precarious dance of uncertainty had reached its height. Standing at the edge of this personal abyss, Thomas knew one thing. Tomorrow could be the catalyst for everything to change, or perhaps the beginning of another struggle. What awaited them was unknown, yet undeniably essential. Would they bravely reclaim their bond or fracture beneath the weight of unspoken truths? The morning unfolded like a blank canvas, light streaming through Thomas's window, yet the room felt heavy with anticipation. As he paced, the air thickened with every unspoken thought about his forthcoming conversation with Mark. He had prepared, rehearsed, and visualized countless scenarios, but nothing could adequately frame the emotional precipice he was on. His mind raced through moments from their past, brotherly spats, shared secrets, laughter that sometimes felt like an echo of a bygone era. Every memory weighed against his mission. They were both his motivation and his vulnerability. He could no longer doubt his intentions. Architecture, he decided, was not simply about bricks and mortar. It was the embodiment of their narratives, a means to mend fractured connections. As the clock ticked closer to their meeting, Thomas found himself returning once more to the sketches he had set aside. Each line and curve reflected his deepening understanding of himself. He wasn't merely an architect. He had become an artist, a storyteller with the power to convey layered experiences through structure. Perhaps his instincts had steered him here for a reason, a deep-rooted call to not only reshape spaces, but to redefine a relationship desperately in need of reimagining. In those sketches lay an unexpected revelation. Thomas began to recognize the parallels between his profession and his relationship with Mark. Both demanded security and spontaneity. Both thrived under scrutiny, yet flourished in trust. This transformative perspective galvanized him, igniting confidence that perhaps their challenges could be systematically unraveled, like a model being deconstructed to reveal its essential framework. He recalled Mark's hesitance to confront old wounds, and how that had mirrored his own fears about exposure. The idea struck him. Rather than forcing openness, he could construct a sense of safety around their dialogue. He resolved to design their conversation as meticulously as he would an intricate building, a space where they could explore each other's foundations, revealing strength amidst the vulnerabilities. Time crept closer to noon, the moment of reckoning. Finally, he made his way to the small cafe where they had agreed to meet. The familiar scent of freshly brewed coffee filled the air as he stepped inside, mingling with the underlying tension emanating from his nerves. At a table by the window, he spotted Mark. His brother had arrived early, fidgeting with a cup, eyes downcast, as if burdened by an invisible weight. "Hey," Thomas greeted gently, taking the seat across from him. He searched Mark's face for signs of openness, but the steadfast lines etched across it told a story of apprehension. "Hey," Mark replied, his voice shaky, laced with acknowledgement, yet clouded by uncertainty. Thomas took a deep breath, letting the air flow in and out, reconnecting his mind to their purpose. "I've been thinking a lot about this project. It's more than just buildings. It's about us. Our journey," he ventured, his voice steady, yet earnest. Mark's eyes flickered with interest but soon fell back to the coffee cup. "It's a lot to unpack, Tom. Our history isn't easy for me." "Exactly, and that's why we need to confront it together," Thomas pressed, drawing on memories of their shared childhood, each moment a brick in their emotional wall. "I believe our past can become our foundation. If we align our strengths, maybe we can rebuild something truly beautiful." There was a pulse of silence. Thomas watched as Mark wrestled with his emotions, a chaotic interplay of reluctance and hope. Time seemed to elongate, the cafe's chatter fading into a distant hum. Mark raised his head, catching Thomas's gaze. I want us to be better, but I'm scared of what digging deeper might reveal. Thomas's heart raced as he realized the pivotal moment unfolding, a recognition of fear not just from Mark, but shared between them. This was the crux. Both were standing on a precipice, and how they chose to navigate it would redefine not only their professional endeavors, but their relationship itself. Let's take it one step at a time then, Thomas offered, a tentative truce emerging. We can build on this. Each step can lead us somewhere new. But just as a flicker of understanding passed between them, Thomas sensed a storm gathering. Would Mark accept this slow approach? Could they honor each other's vulnerability, and in doing so, create a new blueprint for their future? The air crackled with possibilities, leaving Thomas grappling with the potential risks of their encounter. The real challenge loomed ahead, as he wondered if Mark would ultimately take that step towards healing or retreat back into the safety of avoidance. As they sat in silence, the weight of past and future hung between them, begging for resolution. Could tomorrow serve as the tipping point for a transformative journey, or would it merely be another moment lost to hesitation? The sun dipped low in the sky as Thomas sat across from Mark, the cafe's warm ambiance cloaked in tension. The questions that had lingered between them for years danced in the air, each more significant than the last. Can we move forward? Hung heavily, perhaps the most pertinent of all. Why don't we start with what we both want from this? Thomas suggested, attempting to anchor their conversation in mutual objectives rather than old wounds. Mark's brow furrowed, but curiosity flickered in his eyes. To be recognized, Mark replied quietly, the murmur laced with vulnerability. I've felt like a shadow to your legacy and Dad's, resentful of your talent but frustrated with our past. And I've felt trapped, clinging to expectations imposed by the same legacy that shackled us both. With those words, the walls around them started to crack. Their admission of fear created a bridge instead of a chasm. For the first time, vulnerability was no longer a weakness. It held the power to transform. Why can't we redefine our legacy? Thomas proposed, emboldened by a sense of purpose. Architecture that reflects not just our father's ideals, but our own. A dialogue about who we are and who we want to be. I've spent years in the shadows of my blindness, but I can sculpt our shared vision into something new. I've always seen you as the genius, Mark replied, shaking his head. How could I ever contribute to the brilliance you embody? No one is brilliant alone, Thomas countered, direct yet understanding. We have something different to offer. Together, we could craft spaces that embrace memories, history, and accessibility. Bridging the divide within us could illuminate paths for others. There was a poignant silence following his declaration, the essence of possibility lingering like fragrant coffee. Mark leaned in, eyes ignited with a flicker of hope. What if we hold a series of workshops, engage the community, involve our future clients in the process? I can help lead some architectural elements to ensure it resonates appropriately. Excitement surged in Thomas. This could be the moment they harmonized their visions. Absolutely. Gathering insights from those who will inhabit our spaces will not only enrich our designs, but validate the inclusivity I've always aspired to. Can you feel it changing? Mark asked, the doubt still flickering in his voice. We'd be breaking from the old ways. Thomas nodded, weaving the threads of their ideas together. Yes. It's evolution, not just for our work but for us as brothers. We create sustainability, not just in structures but in our relationship as well. As they spoke, Thomas felt weight lift. A shift had occurred, blending their ambitions with recognition of their past. Each revelation was a step, each idea built upon the one before it. Can we also acknowledge the shared tension? Mark added, allowing a breath of tension to escape him. Let's write down our frustrations. Clear them from our hearts so we can create more freely? Absolutely, Thomas agreed, feeling empowered. They took out their phones and started drafting points on an impromptu list. For the first time, they weren't just squaring off. They were crafting something together, constructing a shared vision instead of defending their egos. As they continued brainstorming, An undeniable bond reaffirmed itself, manifesting in laughter punctuating their work. Mark's unease transformed into a willingness to contribute, speaking openly about aesthetics, community insights, and the need for functional designs. Hours passed unnoticed, each laugh further cementing their newfound collaboration. The cafe began to close, and soon they were the last patrons left. Exhausted but elated, they stepped out into the cool evening air. "Tomorrow, let's set a timeline to launch the workshops," Thomas said. "A tentative connection is transforming into a solid foundation." Mark smiled, and as they left the cafe, the shadows of uncertainty that once loomed over their dynamic significantly receded. They would face challenges ahead, but for the first time, hope enveloped them like the gentle warmth of a sunset. This moment marked a definitive triumph over their past, not just in professional terms but as brothers. They had chosen to embrace the complexity of their shared history, to carry its weight not as a burden but as a compass guiding them toward an enriched future. Thomas was no longer just the blind architect. He was part of a duo, forging a legacy of collaboration grounded in empathy. As they departed, a shared sense of pride surged through Thomas. It felt like liberation. He had not only faced his brother, but had embraced the possibility of a renewed relationship, built upon solid ground. Both brothers understood the potency of their architectural endeavors, mirrored the very relationship that had felt so fraught, paving the way for powerful connections ahead. In the weeks that followed, they forged the skeleton of their community center, bridging differences and illuminating paths with their inclusivity-driven design, each beam and wall a testimony to their newfound unity. They had reclaimed their narrative, and with that accomplishment echoed a deep self-confidence within Thomas. He was no longer overshadowed. He was seen, recognized, and appreciated. Follow your dreams, and reach out to those who enrich your journey. You need to subscribe now for more compelling transformations. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to amplify our stories and bolster our narrative. Comment your thoughts and theories about Thomas and Mark's revival, and share instantly with at least 5 friends who could use a story about overcoming and connection. Don't wait even one more second to spread inspiration.